clearly Putin wants these North Korean soldiers there, otherwise they wouldn't be there. Kim Jong-un is doing him a favour. So what's Kim Jong-un going to get in return?
We've read your piece, quite extraordinary. The suggestion from the South Koreans that North Korean troops who are fighting on behalf of Russia in Ukraine or in Kursk are being sacrificed in extraordinary ways, to such a degree that, if they're caught, they're being told, kill yourselves. First of all, how has South Korea sort of gleaned this information, and how much information have they gleaned to be able to sort of go public with this?
Well, that's a very good question. The origins and the quality of this information are not entirely clear. We know that South Korean personnel, members of the South Korean intelligence agency, are in Ukraine, helping the Ukrainians monitor the North Korean engagement with Russia and to interrogate these North Korean captives. The 3 so far, 1 died, and 2 more in the last few days have been displayed in videos and have survived. So the Ukrainians and South Koreans are working together. What one assumes that this information comes from Ukraine, from Ukrainian intelligence, from observations made on the battlefield. But how accurate it is or how reliable it is another question. The Ukrainians, for example, have come up with rather specific figures which have been shared with us about South Koreans, that 300 North Koreans have been killed and 2,700 wounded. How exactly they know that is unclear. They haven't retrieved 300 bodies, and how they know that 2,700 have been wounded, we don't know. These numbers could easily, and probably are, exaggerations. So, these stories about North Koreans blowing themselves up, we don't know. It's said to have been recorded in kind of documents found on captured or dead North Koreans. But there's also a story that one North Korean soldier was seen trying to set off a hand grenade, apparently to blow himself up, and calling out the name of Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, before he was shot by the Ukrainians. There's no evidence of this other than this assertion. No video, no witnesses that have come forward and described this. So I think, with all these stories that come out in wartime, you have to be very cautious and perhaps skeptical. In every war, the contending sides exaggerate, mislead, and lie on occasion about what the other side are doing. Obviously, it's in the interest of the Ukrainians to make the North Koreans and Russians look as bad and as horrible as possible. And this certainly makes them look very horrible. But having said that, there is some history to suicide tactics on the part of North Korea. If you look back, there was an infamous suicide. There was an infamous assassination attempt by North Korean commandos on a former South Korean president. They infiltrated, they got really quite close to the presidential palace in Seoul, and they had been ordered to commit suicide. There was also, I think it was in 1996, a North Korean submarine was washed up on the shore after suffering a mechanical failure off South Korea. And the members of that crew were either killed by a superior officer who then killed himself. So it's not without precedent for this kind of thing to happen. But, the exact details and the extent to which it's happening now, you have to be a bit cautious about saying that we can confirm it with certainty.
An awful lot to unpack there. Let's talk about that story that you mentioned there about the soldier that tries to detonate a grenade and then ends up getting killed as he's shouting General Kim Jong Un. If we are to believe it, and I would imagine, given the sort of historical precedents you're talking about, a lot of our listeners might be inclined to. Do you feel that that's a sort of symbol of the type of indoctrination that North Koreans deal with almost on a daily basis? I mean, even in that moment, there's no doubt in that soldier's mind that they are dying for what they see as the right reason.
Well, it all depends on whether it's true or not. And the answer is we don't know. It may be true, but it may have been made up by Ukrainian intelligence and South Korean intelligence to make the North Koreans look bad. North Koreans are indoctrinated. They have almost no alternative sources of information other than what they're taught by their terrifyingly propagandistic and very repressive state apparatus. But having said that, they're not zombies. They are still human beings with human instincts of self-preservation. So it's really difficult to say, Toby, whether this can be believed or not. If it was true, it wouldn't be surprising, but it also wouldn't be surprising if it was made up or exaggerated. That's really the best you can say, I think.
Even if you're only talking about the sort of historical precedent that you mentioned, there seems this sort of unbelievable carelessness around North Korean lives here, be it from Vladimir Putin, who I guess is sort of, leading the fight, having been given these 11,000 North Koreans. But you would think that Kim Jong-un would want as many of those soldiers back as he possibly could, wouldn't you? I mean, it's more than a quarter of those who went that are now dead or injured, assuming we are to believe this 3,000 figure.
Well, again, do we believe it? I don't. I mean, I've got no way of confirming it or not, but I think it would be surprising if it was not exaggerated. How do you count 2,700 wounded and 300 killed, unless you have them in hand? But, it must be Ukrainian soldiers reporting to their commanders, oh yeah, I definitely got one, just now. Well, obviously they have an incentive to play it up. Even this figure of 11,000 troops, it's quite unclear where that comes from. It comes via the Ukrainians and the South Koreans, and they have a motive to exaggerate. They want the world to regard the conflict in Ukraine as a global conflict, not just a conflict with Russia, in order to motivate their Western interlocutors to support them and send them more equipment and ammunition and supplies, and not to give up on Ukraine, to back them all the way, and not, as as soon-to-be President Trump seems to be suggesting, to give up and negotiate and make some kind of compromise with Russia. So it's in everyone's interest to play this up. North Korea is not a country that has respect for individual human rights. That's putting it very mildly. It's a horrible, repressive country where people's lives are sacrificed for the regime routinely. But that doesn't mean that all of this is necessarily true.
Regardless of the numbers, what I think probably we can trust is that there may be a lack of understanding of modern warfare. I mean, I saw your colleague Anthony Lloyd writing about a method of effectively clearing minefields where it seems like they just sort of walk through them potentially. Do you trust that? And again, that is then a symbol of this. Do you think that there is less regard for a North Korean life than there might be for a Russian soldier? Put it that way.
We're told, again, it's impossible to confirm that these North Korean soldiers are elite troops, from a kind of special forces unit. If that was the case, it would be very strange if they were just being used to clear minefields. Your special forces are the creme de la creme. You want to protect their lives as far as possible. I would be very surprised if Kim Jong-un was sending his best troops to walk through minefields and blow up mines. again, I have no way of knowing, but that sounds to me like a made-up atrocity story, designed to make the North Koreans look bad. I mean, there's a sort of it's kind of pulled in both directions. The Ukrainians and South Koreans can't really make up their minds, because on the one hand they want to make out that this is a terrible, fearful thing, that the North Koreans are joining this war, and that has the potential to tip it in Russia's favour. But at the same time, they want to make the North Koreans look pathetic and ridiculous and incompetent, and to kind of suggest that Putin is also a bit pathetic in having to turn to these losers to fight his war. Both of those angles are being milked, but it can't be both. It has to be one or the other, and it may be that the truth is somewhere in between.
More broadly, what is South Korea's interest here? How concerned will South Korea be by effectively the training ground that North Korea is able to sort of glean out of this war that they're now involved in?
Yeah, I mean, South Korea is. I don't know if they're particularly worried about that. I mean, on the one hand, it's a training ground, but also it's a. We're told that it's very bad that they're getting all this battle experience, but at the same time, we're being told, well, they're just being mown down and used as cannon fodder. Again, which is it? The South Koreans and Ukrainians, their interest, their sole interest, is in using this information to their advantage, which is why, as independent observers, as journalists, we have to be very careful and not to say more than we can. What we can say is that there are a lot of claims. It's very difficult to know, what the truth of them is. In South Korea, I think there's another concern, and that is, what's going to be the quid pro quo for this? Clearly Putin wants these North Korean soldiers there, otherwise they wouldn't be there. Kim Jong-un is doing him a favour. So what's Kim Jong-un going to get in return? Again, there is only speculation, but part of the sort of worried speculation is that Russia will assist North Korea with military technology that it needs, for example, in improving its ballistic missile systems, maybe even its nuclear warheads. So that's, I think, the biggest concern here. But again, we don't know with certainty, what's been done and what favours have been rendered by the Russians so far.
And then just on these two North Korean soldiers that have been captured alive, Volodymyr Zelensky sort of revealing this as the big sort of first proof that the North Koreans are actually involved in the war. They say they're communicating with secret services with the help of South Korean intel service. What will the Ukrainians want to know? And then will there be sort of differing desires? Will even the South Korean intelligence services be given free rein themselves after Ukraine have learnt what they want out of these two soldiers?
Yes, I don't think anyone outside those intelligence circles knows that. I mean, I'd have assumed that the Ukrainians would like to fully debrief these North Koreans themselves first, and find out what they have to say, and then share it with South Korea next. I suspect they need the South Koreans simply in language terms. I mean, I don't know how many Ukrainian diplomats and intelligence agencies speak fluent Korean. I suspect the number is pretty small. You would assume it is, right? It's not. They're not two countries that had strong relations before this war. So I'm assuming that the South Korean intelligence agents are right in there doing the interpreting for the Ukrainians, but that's not detail that certainly that I've seen that's been revealed.
And just finally, briefly, we've got this video, haven't we? That Zelensky has allowed access to journalists to these two captured North Koreans. Does the publication of these videos, does even the access allowed by journalists to these North Koreans not breach the Geneva Convention?
I think arguably it does. As I understand it, Zelensky said that he wants journalists to be given access to these people. I think the films we saw were films made by Ukrainian intelligence, not actually by independent media, at least so far. I mean, the Geneva Conventions do have things to say about this, about, of course, they protect the rights of prisoners of war, legitimate prisoners of war, which I think these men are. And one of the things they say is that they must be protected from, harm, hostility, ridicule, and public curiosity. And I think most people take that to mean that if you have prisoners of war, you're not supposed to parade them before the cameras and before journalists if they don't want that. So, I mean, that does raise questions. I think that if Ukrainian prisoners in Russia were being paraded before the cameras and expected to answer questions, Ukrainians would complain about that.